The base set era deck I'd like to delve into this time is based around Arcanine. I feel like of the time, this deck is actually really underrated. It has some surprisingly good matchups against other big decks, although it does have some glaring weaknesses to some other large decks that we'll get to later. This Arcanine deck is also very simple to build, and it also came very cheap because it used no rare cards in it, all commons and uncommons. In the research I've done for the competitive meta at the time, I've only seen this deck show up once. And this was at the very end of the Fossil set, where a lot of anti-meta decks were being used, and those big water decks that Arcanine was weak to weren't as prevalent anymore. So I decided to build the deck for myself and play test it against some other big decks from that era. And it stacks up surprisingly well due to Arcanine's consistency in dealing large amounts of damage every turn. So the build I'm about to show is pretty bare bones, it can be tweaked, and it's by no means the definitive version of the deck. Different cards can always be teched in or moved around or replaced depending on what kind of matchups you're up against or how you personally want to play the deck. So let's get into it. Although this is a deck centered around Arcanine, the ideal starter you want is Magmar. And this is the Fossil Magmar, which is preferred over the Fire Punch one, and we'll be running 4 of those. Those Smokescreen and Smog attacks help you stall out defensively while you set up the Growlithe on your bench, get a couple of Fire Energy on there, and get them ready to evolve into Arcanine, where we'll be running a 3-3 evolution line. Both of Arcanine's attacks can be utilized depending on the situation, but the Flamethrower will probably be used the most, which we will need energy retrieval to get those fire energies that are discarded back into your hand. So we will be running a full playset of energy retrieval and plus power as well in order to get that extra 10 damage and knock out those 60 HP basics that you see a lot in the game. And when setting up with Magmar, energy removal will help stall out your opponent and keep the game going while you can set up a good Arcanine on the bench. Also, to help stall out your opponent setting up, you can always Gust of Wind out their basics that they're trying to pump up on the bench and go ahead and knock those out with a big attack from Arcanine if you need to. I find a playset of Potion is also essential for this deck since you want to heal off all the damage that Arcanine could be doing to itself if it uses its takedown attack. Switch is also very important because Arcanine has a high retreat cost and you want to save those energies for the attack since they're going to be getting discarded anyway and you don't want to waste them. And of course, because the base set era meta is based hugely in draw power, you want to throw in a playset of Bills, and I like to use 3 Professor Oaks to round out this deck. The double colorless energy lets you get off that takedown to deal 80 damage on turn 3, so it's also really important in getting the upper hand on your opponent really early on. So I do run 4 double colorless energy in this deck, as well as 15 fire energy. Now this may seem like a lot of energy, especially for a deck that's basically only using 7 Pokemon to attack max, but a lot of the fire energies you're discarding in Arcanine's Flamethrower aren't going to be able to be retrieved right off hand. And like I said, the ideal start you want for this deck is to get that Magmar in your opening hand. The Fossil Magmar is a solid Pokemon all by itself. With 70 HP, it can take plenty of hits, especially early game. That Smokescreen attack for 1 energy can really help stall out your opponent and keep from getting damage at all on Magmar, while that Smog attack for only 2 energy can deal some solid damage and also put a special condition on your opponent, which in a lot of cases can actually deactivate any abilities that may be giving you trouble as well. With the speed and utility of this Magmar card, I would rank it right up there with your Hitmonchan and your Electabuzz type cards that can hit early on with some really good effects. I don't know why this card doesn't show up in other decks. I know it is used in some variants of Haymaker. With Magmar as your support Pokemon, you can get those Growlithe down on the bench and start adding energy to them. You're pretty much never going to use that Flare attack. 20 damage for 2 energy isn't great, but you can evolve into that Arcanine on turn 2, and on turn 3 start attacking. Any fire energy you put on there, you can just discard for Flamethrower, get it right back with energy retrieval. Also, if you get a double colorless on turn 3, you can throw that down and deal 80 damage. And the strategy here is consistently dealing that 80 damage and healing off whatever you hit yourself for with potions. Now, I chose not to run super potions in this deck because it's discarding your own energy as well, and because Arcanine is going to be frequently discarding its energies with Flamethrower, you don't want to put it in a bad spot. Because the deck is so simple and bare bones, it doesn't really need computer search. Using the Bill and Professor Oak, you can draw whatever you need and not really need to look for anything. It's not very complicated. You have your Magmar or Growlithe out, and you just want to evolve into Arcanine as quickly as possible and start those damage streaks. This deck has a really good matchup against damage swap decks. Magmar is a really great counter for that Mr. Mime. Not only can you deal damage to it because Magmar's attacks are either dealing 20 or 10, you can also get a poison on there or stop Mr. Mime from attacking you next turn depending on your coin flip. Gust of Wind also lets you pull out those Alakazams on the bench, which is the worst enemy of a damage swap deck, is when you pull those Alakazams out and destroy them. Magmar and Arcanine also handle Haymaker decks really well. Hitmonchan can't do a whole lot to Arcanine because of that 100 HP, and you can keep using those potions to hull off whatever damage Hitmonchan's doing while you use flamethrowers on it. Both of your attackers in this deck also have a type advantage over Scyther, which is a staple to almost all of the decks in this meta because of that free retreat. Because you can one-hit KO that Scyther, it's not even really safe for your opponent to put one on the bench because of Gust of Wind, or to try and send it in and be a damage sponge because you're just going to knock it out and take a prize. Now, the main reason that I assume this deck never saw much play is because of the prevalence of huge water decks at the time, mainly Rain Dance. Anything that had Blastoise and Pokemon Breeder in it that could get those big stage 2s out really quick and just sweep the field. Big water cards were a staple across a lot of different decks. Not only Blastoise, you also had Articuno, Gyarados, and even stuff like Dugong and Poliwrath that were seen in a lot of different decks. Due to weakness, you didn't really see very many fire types played at all, even though you had stuff like Ninetales that was just a better version of Charizard, or even the Magmar from base set or Fossil. At the end of the base set era metagame, Rain Dance saw a huge decrease in playability because a lot of decks were ready for it. They would tech in cards like Mr. Mime that could completely stall out Rain Dance decks. And because of that, that's when I think this Arcanine deck could have really stood out and done some damage, especially since people weren't really ready for it. It wasn't a big deck, and it was really underestimated how quickly it could set up and how consistently it could do 50 or 80 damage every turn. Let me know down in the comments what kinds of decks you would like to see me pick apart from this era. I am starting in the base set and trying to work my way up, so let me know what your favorite decks were, which ones did you play most. Thanks for watching, and until next time.